my Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto.
Welcome to episode 1077 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Doer, the world's most comfortable pants and shorts. Save 15% with the promo code TorontoMike. Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis, guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Joining me this week, making his Toronto Mic debut, is Richard Trapunski. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Hey, good to be here.
Whereabouts are you coming from this afternoon? What neck of the GTA?
I live on McCall Street in the Village by the Grange, just pretty near the old Much Music building.
299 Queen Street West.
Not far from there. Yeah.
That's that one. That you said old Much Music building. I have to shout out 299 Queen. Okay, now you took the TTC, right?
Yeah, I did.
What was the experience like? I want to hear what was your TTC experience like to the TMDS studio here.
It wasn't bad. I was surprised because it's far away, but it was all one bus, the Queen Street replacement bus, because the streetcar is, I guess there's construction being done like there always is.
Stay on that mic, Richard.
Yeah,
We're going to capture this gold, buddy.
I apologize.
Okay, keep going. That's good.
Yeah. So it was
It was okay.
It was okay. It was like an hour-long bus ride, but it got me all the way
It worked
here.
for you. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad you took public transit instead of another car on the highway. So thank you for doing that. Do you ever bike? I'm just curious. Like, do you ever bike from A to B or A to Z?
I'm not a big bike guy, but I'm in favor of bikes.
You're pro bike.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm pro
I would
bike.
love to meet the guy who's like anti-bike. Like, I won't accept these bicycles on our trails.
I've met a lot of those guys.
Those are the guys who are like, these roads are for cars.
Working for Now Magazine. I think you saw it a lot in the comments.
We're going to talk now. We're going to talk a lot about now. I just want to let the listenership know, let the FOTMs know that your mother, so Richard, we got to start by talking about your mom.
Sure.
Your mom's an FOTM.
She is. She's been on twice, I think.
Yeah, twice. Absolutely. Is your mom a proud FOTM? Is this something she wears like a badge of honor?
She was really excited for me to be on the podcast. So
Okay.
yeah. I think she had a great time both times.
Now, because people heard Richard Trapunski and they're wondering, who the hell is your mom? Who is your mother?
My mom is Ellen Roseman, longtime columnist for the Toronto Star. She does like personal finance and consumers.
Like a consumer
issues.
advocate almost. Love your mom. So shout out to Ellen Roseman. She's, like you said, been on here multiple times. So my question for you, the first hard-hitting question for you, Richard Trapunski, did you listen to your mom's appearances on Toronto Mic?
This isn't the hard-hitting question I was expecting.
Okay, there's more.
No, I did. I think I'm conflating both. She was on once in the Zoom era.
She was here, in the big one, I'll say, is her first appearance where she's physically here like you are now, and we discuss her career like from A to Z. The second was like a Zoom during the COVID era. But that first episode, did you listen to that one?
I did. Don't quiz me on what she said, but I did listen. I was listening.
What did she say at the 23-minute mark? I want to know.
I was listening to see if she mentioned my name, but I don't remember if she did.
No, she kept you a dark secret. She didn't want people to know. But I'm glad you're here. I will shout out now. This is something exciting I'm going to do before we crack open our Great Lake beers on the microphone. I'm going to shout out all previous parent-child combos to appear on Toronto Mic'd, okay? So these are, and I think I have a full list here. The parent/child FOTM combos. Are you ready?
All right.
Like, this is now the company you're joining. Like, you and Ellen, your mother, are now in this exclusive club. Okay.
A trivia question for future guests.
Right. Just don't ask me who was the first, because I haven't done that homework. But okay. Let's start with Kate Wheeler. Do you know Kate Wheeler? I'm going to put you on the spot here. A longtime like CFTO journalist. I think she's at Global News now. But Kate Wheeler.
Okay.
She was on the show. She came on with Christine Bentley. And then a couple years later, her daughter, Alexandra Beaton, who's an actress, came on the program. So there's one set, Kate Wheeler and Alexandra Beaton.
Nice.
Paulie Morris from Hits FM in St. Catharines. He helped build the White House of Rock. Paulie Morris came on, and also on this program is Paulie's daughter, Siobhan Morris. Siobhan works for CTV Toronto, covering Queen's Park, I believe.
Nice.
So you go, just fake interest. Just pretend you're interested. Okay.
I'm very interested.
Paul Burford, who is a co-creator and producer of Just Like Mom. You might be a bit young. Did you ever see Just Like Mom?
No.
Too young. You're too young. Okay, I'll tell you stories about Just Like Mom another day. But okay, so Paul co-created that with Fergie Ulver. And Paul's son is an FOTM because Brock Burford is Paul's son. And Brock is also known as Broccoli, one half of Sunshine and Broccoli. Do you have kids, Richard?
I don't.
Okay, well, kids might know Sunshine and Broccoli. If you don't have kids, it's probably best you don't know Sunshine and Broccoli. But I'm not done yet. A couple more here, maybe a few more. I could do the whole episode about the parent-children combos that have done the program. But Steve Simmons, is this a name you've heard of? Steve Simmons.
I do know Steve Simmons. I don't know him personally, but
because you're a sports fan, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite sport to watch on television?
Basketball. I'm a big Raptors fan.
You're a big Raptors guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steve Simmons works for the Toronto Sun, longtime journalist there. His son is a guest on this program as well, Jeff Simmons. And we're not done yet, Richard. Bear with me here. Barry Whitkin. Well, let me start with his son, Andrew Whitkin. Andrew Whitkin is the owner of StickerU.com, a proud sponsor of the program, and he's an FOTM. There's a Toronto Mike sticker for you in that ashtray. So you're taking that home with you, Richard.
Nice.
Thank you, StickerU.com. That's where you get your stickers and such. And that ashtray, by the way, I know your mom's listening, which might make this awkward, but do you smoke weed?
I would say I'm a very occasional weed guy.
Okay, well, when you occasionally smoke weed, make sure you pick that up at Canna Cabana, because they won't be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. And then you can use that ashtray and keep things tidy around your home.
Nice.
So, and why am I mentioning Andrew Whitkin? Well, because his dad, Barry Whitkin, was on the program, because Barry Whitkin is one of the co-founders of the Purple Onion, which was a Yorkville like folk coffee shop back in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, Neil Osborne from 5440 and his daughter Kendall Osborne are FOTM. So there you go. There is the full and complete list of parent-children combos to be on Toronto Mic'd.
That's way more than I would have expected.
Well, thanks to the VP of sales who helped me out, because I didn't expect that many either. There are two on my hit list, I will point out. So I've had Brian Hayes is on my hit list. His dad has been on the show. So Brian Hayes, I would like to get on. You're a sports fan, so you know he's on TSN Radio. And I've had Macco Jr. on the show. I would like Bob Macowitz Sr. on the program. So I'm just putting this into the universe. I'm looking for Brian Hayes and Macco Sr. to increase that list there.
Nice. You could do a family reunion episode.
That's Just Like Mom. We could do like a Just Like Mom episode. Okay. What are you drinking there?
This is Great Lakes Lager from Great Lakes Brewery.
Okay, Richard, on that mic, right on the mic, right in front.
Okay, let's do it. Oh, gotta get started first.
Well, yeah. It takes practice to get perfect at it. Okay, sounds good. Here, I'll show you how you do it. Right? All right. And this is, again, a sunny side because I'm in love with it. Okay.
That's way better than mine.
Lots of practice. So cheers to Great Lakes. I'm actually, tomorrow night, I'm going to attend the grand opening of, they have a new location at Jarvis and Queens Quay, Lower Jarvis. So I'm going to be there tomorrow night if you're looking for me. If you want to, punch me in the nose or just say hi, come to, I shouldn't say the first line anymore because there are people who want to punch me in the nose. But So don't come and punch me in the nose, but if you want to come and say hi, then I'm at Great Lakes. It's called the Beer Pub. No, Brew Pub. They're calling it the Brew Pub, so I'll be there tomorrow night. Where do I begin with you, Richard? Do you mind if we go back? I'm curious about what you can tell me about Chart Attack when you worked there. Like Chart Attack, I remember fondly Chart Attack, but just give us as many details as you can about like when you got involved with Chart Attack and what exactly you did and what it was like there at the time.
Yeah, sure. When I started there, it was 2013. So it was past the golden era. I think it was actually different ownership than probably the chart that most people know.
Channel Zero.
Channel Zero was the owner.
CHCH.
Yeah, exactly. CHCH was out of Hamilton. We were in an office in Toronto at the junction right at Dundas and Keele.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where my buddy Joe, people know him as Joe from TO, but his dad used to cut hair there.
Oh, okay.
Very strong Maltese population there.
Yeah, definitely. I was back in the junction recently, and it was only like 5 years since the last time maybe I'd really hung out there. It's totally, totally different.
Oh, they gentrified the fuck out of that, okay?
I mean, just like the rest of the city, I guess. But yeah, so I was there in 2013. I became the editor-in-chief. By that time, it evolved out of Chart Magazine in the 90s.
I have a copy. Okay,
oh, you do?
Just because Brother Bill sent this to me because he thought I might enjoy it. I'll just, you can take a peek at that. But that's like a vintage. That's
this is probably a collector's item here.
So that's from the good old days, the 90s, as I say. But, that you can get lost breezing through that. Brother Bill just thought it would speak to me, and he knows me very well, so he sent me that copy of it.
Do you know? So it's the top 50 Canadian albums of all time.
Right. Is that the one that Sloan wins with?
I was just going to ask you. I was just going to ask you if you knew, but yes, it was Sloan.
Yeah, and I don't remember the rest of that list except that I'm familiar with most of those jams.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this version of Chart was like, it was, the Can Rock Bible. It was Sloan and Neil Young and the Tragically Hip and the Rheostatics.
Love Junk's on there. Shout out to Mo.
Yeah. And yeah, the version that I did was sort of, what I was trying to do was the next evolution of that. Like, what does Can Rock mean now? It was a lot less.
Give us the era. What years are we talking about?
2013 to 2017, I want to say. Okay. No, 2016.
So,
2016.
So this is a very different Chart Attack than the one that we think of from back in the day.
I would say it was not totally different. It wasn't a reinvention, but it was sort of the evolution. I had been covering music for a lot of years already by that point. And I had seen sort of a sea change in how we define Canadian music, or can rock especially. It was a lot of like white guys and guitars.
Is that Hawksley Workman, or are we going more recent than that?
Hawksley Workman. Well, I don't know. I'm thinking of that was the canon of Canadian albums right there. Top 50 Canadian albums of all time.
So Neil Young's on there.
Yeah. And I was seeing a lot of, and this has continued obviously for the past decade or more, but I think there's a different canon of what we would consider the top, what we would consider even a Canadian musician necessarily. There's a lot more recognition of Indigenous music, for instance. There's a lot more, and being a multicultural place, like you'll see music in Spanish, music from different countries in Africa, and it's not considered world music necessarily anymore. It's Canadian music.
Now, what music, when you're listening on your own time to music you legit like for your own personal pleasure, what kind of music is Richard Trapunski spinning?
I'm like all over the place probably. For so long at Now, right, I was covering Toronto artists, so I think that I always have a bit of a like homerism, a hometown love.
Okay, shout out some. Now, we're going to obviously dive deep into the Now experience, but even right now, just get specific. Like, name check some Toronto artists that you dig.
Okay, I'll tell you one in particular, which is the band Fucked Up. I assume I can.
You can swear. I think I already dropped an F-bomb, actually.
I'm actually going to see them tonight.
Okay.
Part of
the reason. That's way cooler. I'm going to see Black Crows, which I'm looking forward to tonight. But
nice.
Fucked Up. There you go, buddy.
Yeah, so it's the 10-year anniversary of their David Comes to Life album, which was their gigantic concept album, sort of opus. And the fact that it's the 10-year anniversary is crazy to me because I wrote the cover story on them for that album 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And the fact that it's turning 10 is just like, I guess I'm that age now. Yeah.
And you wrote that for Chart Attack.
No. I did that for Now. I was actually
okay.
a long-time freelance contributor.
Okay. We're getting, so we got to get so why do you leave Chart Attack? What happens with Chart Attack? And yeah, any other details you can tell me about
Sure,
Chart Attack?
Okay, so Chart Attack.
Because we'll go in chronological order, and then I'll just pepper you with annoying questions as we go on.
Well, Chart Attack, it evolved out of Chart Magazine. It was, they actually, I think they went dark. They folded essentially, and there were all the eulogies. Canada's losing one of its big music magazines,
right?
And it went dark for I don't know how long, maybe 6 months or so, and then it got bought by a guy named Rob Osfield, and he had a company called An Pop, which was sort of it was like teen pop was sort of their bailiwick.
And the Corys. I just dated myself with the Corys.
This was the early 2010s.
I know.
It was probably more Justin Bieber.
That's right.
Yeah. They had their alternative side thing called An Pop Side B.
Okay.
And then they bought the Chart Attack brand and just relaunched Side B as Chart Attack, essentially. And then eventually both those sites got sold to Channel Zero, and they got amalgamated. They moved into that office at Dundas and Keele,
right.
And that's when they hired me.
So is this one of your first gigs in media? Like, what came before that, just so I have the right Richard Trapunski timeline here? I
mean, if you want to go super far back,
yeah.
My first job was at a website called martiniboys.com. Not many people are probably going to remember.
And you were
this.
a model on that site, is that correct?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. But it covered bars and restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And stores in Toronto. And it had a very, I think, millennial aesthetic. It was very, it was in the days of long guest lists and bouncers at the door. And, I was a 22-year-old pretending like I was part of that scene in any way.
And I'm guessing because of who your mother is, who, wrote at the Toronto Star for so many years, that you had been exposed to, writing as a career. Like this was an option for you growing up because you saw mom do it.
Yeah, I definitely grew up in it. I remember going to Take Your Kid to Work Day in grade, whatever that was, grade 8, I guess. And I went to
9, maybe
9. I went to the Toronto Star newsroom at one Yonge Street there.
Right.
And there were a bunch of other kids too, some of whom I think are also journalists now. Adam Miller, he works for, oh man, I shouldn't have brought his name up without knowing exactly where he works for. But
shout out to Adam Miller.
He's like a hard news journalist guy. But he was there too with me. We sat in on the pitch meeting.
Okay.
And then, my mom took me to the cafeteria, to the gym, I think. And then in the 1 hour of work she was able to do while I was there, she just put me on a computer and let me play on the computer. But I remember going by the music critic. It wasn't Ben Rayner yet. I don't know who it would have been. Going by his desk, and he said, "Oh, you can take some promo CDs if you want."
Wow.
I don't
would
remember.
Would it be Peter Howell by any chance? I'm trying to think. Peter Howell did music before movies.
Peter Howell was a music guy. I don't think it was still him at that point. I don't know. It's a good question. This would have been, how can I date myself? This would have been the late 90s.
Okay, and it's not Peter Goddard, obviously, who we recently lost.
Whoever it was, he wasn't
It must have been a Peter, okay? They're all Peters over there, but okay, it was John. I'm just trying to think of all the music writers at Star. Now they don't have any, but they had many for a long time.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the promo CDs I got either, but it was probably I feel like it was like Papa Roach or...
Cut my life into pieces.
There you go. Perfect.
I saw them open for Eminem and Limp Bizkit at the Skydome back in 2000.
Nice. Toronto's a small town. Also, one of my friends growing up. Do you know the music journalist Nicholas Jennings?
No, but I know the journalist Peter Jennings, the late great. But
you should have Nick Jennings on your show. He's still doing it. He's still really good. He's kind of a historian. He recently wrote a book about Joni Mitchell, I think.
Okay, don't upset Liz Braun, okay? She came over here a couple of weeks ago and went off on Joni Mitchell.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, Gordon Lightfoot. He also wrote a recent book on Gordon Lightfoot.
Nice.
But yeah, he was my friend's dad growing up, and
Okay.
I think I got some promo CDs out of him too. So I was
You were exposed to it. To you, this is a realistic option for you, because I think a lot of us fantasize. Even I think when I'm journaling back in the day, you're fantasizing that one day you're gonna write for Rolling Stone magazine or something. Like this is sort of like this was viable to you.
I was exposed to it. I don't know if I ever. I mean, my mom definitely wasn't in the music sphere.
No.
Writing about business. My dad did work for a few years for Milestone Radio, which was the company that eventually became Flow 93.5.
Of course.
When he was working there, it was the first time they were bidding for a frequency, and they didn't get it. It was CBC that got it.
Right.
But
right,
a few years later,
99.1.
then they did launch the...
Yeah, and I think it went to, I think Kiss got it. I mean, there was a country station that got it too before Flow became. And shout out to Farley Flex, who's a good FOT.
Yeah, Farley Flex. I think I met him when I was, 12 years old.
We still talk all the time. I think he's a fascinating cat. I am a big Farley Flex fan. Big shout out to him.
Yeah, he was on your show, right?
Yeah, he's been on the show a couple times. And John Sinden, too, was there in the early days, because every time I talk, because I'm trying to get them to do an episode like, basically, what the fuck happened to Flow? Like, there was this whole promise and pledge and mandate, and I think it failed. It failed the city. And I know that you'll say that they basically sold or gave away the logo, basically. And this is a weird move. Here, you take the logo and call yourself this, and then we're going to go become something. I don't know where the audience is for what they are now. Some kind of a talk, play what we want hybrid thing that
Right.
I can't imagine will succeed, but I've been wrong before. But please continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Denim Jolly was the owner
Yes.
at that point, and he sold it long ago. He sold it to, I think, whatever the precursor to Bell Media was. Flow has been, by this point, like when
But it's never been, okay.
Flow's
So
been passed around so many
it's been
times.
passed around because New Cap had it, and then
Yeah.
it was Stingray, and now it was given away to G98.
Right, and they rebranded, and then they rebranded back.
Right, they became the Move.
Yeah.
And then they went back and they did, they've been all over the place. And again, now, I mean, I talk about this quite a bit with Mark Weisblad, who's going to be here on Thursday, but I personally don't understand who the current, what is it, 93.5? Is that the frequency? I don't know who it's for right now. Like, I'm not too sure. These are people I don't know with very, like, phony stories that seem like they're actors on the phone, and then they're just playing whatever. So you might hear a 90s dance track or something, and then you're going to hear a country song. Like, I just don't understand. What do I know? I'm not from radio. I don't understand who that's for.
Yeah, I can't say I've listened much to the... I don't even fully remember what it's called.
I know. I should look it up. I can't remember what it's called either. I'm going to look it up right now. But you tell me what happens to you at Chart Attack.
Right. So, yeah, eventually I ended up at Chart Attack. I was the editor-in-chief there.
It's called Today.
Today.
What a forgettable name that is. Holy smokes. Okay. Today Radio.
I work for a place called Now. It's kind of similar. But yeah, I was at Chart Attack in those days, basically trying to figure out what does a 21st century version of that magazine look like.
Right.
All online. We didn't have a print publication at that point.
Right.
And we had a big video division as well. That was the other thing.
The big pivot to video.
Yeah, big. We were before people started talking about pivots to video.
Right. Have they all pivoted back yet? I'm just waiting. I'm just wondering.
Most of them, I think, probably have, or they pivoted to TikTok or something like that. Podcasts.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I did that for 3 to 4 years, something like that. And it was
but that's fun because you're writing about music.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really cool to be able to kind of define where it was going to go and what we were going to do. And I think that we were able to do some really cool stuff over there. It was sort of, how can we cover Canada and all its facets really and we really tried to be like on a ground level, I think. And, being able to tell, big think piecey things, and then also like, little scene reports of whatever, London, Ontario. And yeah, it was fun to do. It was really fun for that 3 or 4 years and work with some really, really talented writers.
And is it at this time, because you become a Polaris Music Prize juror?
Mm-hmm.
So is that coinciding with your work at Chart Attack? Or does that come when you join Now?
I've been a juror for a really long time now. I want to say over a decade. I think I was still at Now when I started there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we need now is why do you leave Chart Attack and how do you end up at Now? And then I have lots of Now questions.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I could write a book about digital media, right? And the way that it's being, but
No, don't write the book. Just
Yeah.
spill it all into my microphone
Yeah.
right now. I'll capture as much as I can. Oh,
Well-
shout out to Cam Gordon, I think, who wants to write that actual very book.
Oh,
And-
there you go.
And he used to write. He would have. I know he sent me screen caps of like something he'd submit and write for like Chart Attack. I feel like Cam's been in that on that publication at some point. By the way, I want to shout out a guy. He was over here the other day. We did an episode with a guy called Promo Man. His name's Nick Panaseco. And there was a book about Promo Man written by Bob Clanick. And I hope I said Bob's last name right. Bob Clanick. And Bob Clanick also, I believe, on the jury for the Polaris Music Prize at some point. So
Yeah. So you asked me how I left there.
Yeah.
I got laid off. The guy who was my boss left, and I think that we were always sort of, Channel Zero is a very old media company. They had CHCH, mostly a TV company, to be honest.
right.
And I think that, Rob, when he sold them Chart Attack and Anpop, was able to convince them that, they need some digital properties to be able to modernize.
Right.
The thing about that is they never really invested in the digital properties. I kind of felt like we were the kids, we were at the kids' table in the office.
Right.
And nobody quite knew what we did or why we were there. And then when he was gone, we got shuffled into, I think, programming, which was a weird division for us to be in. And for the very first time, they looked at Chart Attack and said, hey, I don't know if this is making us any money.
So Chart
Yeah.
Attack was to Channel Zero what BlogTO is to Zoomer.
Yeah, that's actually probably a fair comparison.
Except they probably didn't pay $15 million for Chart Attack.
Yeah, I don't know what the price was, but I don't think it was 15 million.
All right. We'll get back to the old BlogTO situation when we talk more about now. But okay, so basically you're out of a job, and how do you end up at Now?
Yeah, I mean, I freelanced for a little bit at that point. I just kind of kept my ear to the ground. I was a long time, not only Now reader, but I was a Now contributor from 2010 to 13 before I got that chart job.
Right.
I was a freelancer, but
By the way, back then, what would they pay for a freelancer who wrote something for them? Give me the real look.
This is
I
the
want
real
the real talk.
the real talk. Okay, so the rates were not great, but I'd say they were comparable among magazines like this. For a feature, it was at that point, it was a lot of like a band would be coming to town that week. They're playing the Horseshoe. You'd interview them. You'd write it was kind of a template. You'd write your story. You'd have a catchy lead, 2 or 3 different quotes.
Right.
And let's say it was 600 to 800 words.
Okay.
I think I would get paid $100, I want to say. There were album reviews that were little just capsules. They were, 150 words or something like that. And those ran for, I think, 75. And show reviews and this kind of thing. But, I was even though I was a freelancer, I was a permalancer. I was in the music section, I'd say, every single week, most of the time, often with like a feature and 2 album reviews and maybe a live review. So you could kind of add them up.
Yeah, it's volume, right? Like you gotta, to make ends meet, you gotta do a bunch of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I was music editor and I was holding the purse strings, we adjusted the rates a little bit, but it was still the features got a little bit longer and we paid a little bit more for them. Same with the live reviews. But
Well, none of this. So, firstly, none of this shocks me. Even because 2 days ago, Reshmi Nair was here, sitting where you're sitting, and Reshmi she's got the afternoon drive show on 1010 right now. It's called The Rush. So Reshmi was telling me about, like, in Vancouver, she was on the sister station. So we have 680 News here, and they had whatever their frequency was, but it's the same station in Vancouver. And she said she had to leave because she was a reporter for their equivalent to 680 News, and we're going back like 15 years. But she was making $40,000 a year, and she could not afford to live in Vancouver, which at the time was more expensive than Toronto. I think I read a report like we just passed them. Like this was like breaking news. Toronto's number one now, and who the hell knows whether that's true or not. But bottom line is she could not afford to live in Vancouver making $40,000 a year as a reporter at that station. And And again, it is going back 15 years. So hopefully those salaries like are at least increasing with the cost of living, which is
You would hope so. Yeah,
but
you would
don't. By
hope
the way, there's no guarantee that happened. But so when I hear this, like, okay, this is what this Canadian media property is paying for this.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to just really lower my expectations so that so because I've never worked in this industry, so that sounds like, so $100 for your big story about the band coming to the Horseshoe.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. But I wrote hundreds of those.
Well, you'd have to.
Yeah, and I was just constantly doing them every week. I had a really good time. I was in my early 20s. I was going to fucking I want to say 3 concerts a week, something like that. I don't think I can still do that. I don't have the stamina, but those were.
You could do it. I'm going to go to, so I went to Moist and Tea Party on Saturday, and then I went to the Jays game Sunday. Tonight I'm at Black Crows, and Friday I'm at Roger Waters. Like, if I can maintain this at my old age, you can do it, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different lifestyle now now I was, I guess, the guy who was sending other people out to 3 shows a week.
Okay, so let's dive into this.
Yeah.
So you said you were a freelancer at Now Magazine from 2010 to 2013.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't start as a music editor until 2016, right?
2016, not long after I was gone from Chart Attack.
And how did that happen?
I was still friends with some people who worked there. And
Do you want to name check them? I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
I had Michael Hollett here not too long ago, and now he's Mr. Next.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked. I'm fascinated by Now and most of the stuff that Michael couldn't speak to because post Michael Hollett. But I'm fascinated by the last 5 years at Now and what you're here now as the guy who's going to give me the details.
Right.
So when you join Now, who owns it?
Alice Klein.
Right, who's the spouse, the former spouse?
They
ex.
co-owned it, Michael Hollett and Alice Klein.
She bought him out at some point.
She did buy him out. When I was freelancing in the early 2010s there, I think that they were still co-owning it. And sometime when I was at Chart Attack was when she bought him out. So when I came back, it was just her.
Well, it's when, the age-old story that when the relationship breaks down, then the business relationship sometimes breaks down.
I mean, they were married and they got divorced, probably in the 90s, and they continued running the paper together for
that you know better than I do.
Quite a while.
Right. And so this is Alice Klein?
Alice Klein, yeah.
Right. So she's the owner when you arrive.
She was the owner. I had heard on the street that they were looking for, I think, a copy editor, and then also Susan Cole was retiring. She was the longtime entertainment editor from the beginning, I think.
Oh yeah, and also, if you don't, man, Richard, I'm really asking a lot of you here, but any memories, like if you can name check anyone else you remember at the publication, like I'm archiving Toronto's history here. Okay, Richard,
Okay.
you're going to be a key
I could drop
witness.
all sorts of names.
Drop names like that's your job.
Right. Well, yeah. So Susan was retiring, and I knew that, and there was a copy editor who was taking a leave, I want to say, and I was friends with Kevin Ritchie. He was he became the culture editor actually when Susan retired, but he was working for the music section at the time, and Carla Gillis, who was the music editor at that point.
Okay.
And so I knew they were looking for someone. I asked Alice Klein out for coffee because I knew her a little bit. I didn't know her well, but I knew her from my days of freelancing.
Right.
This is my networking talk. And I said, hey, I know that you've got some people leaving. I know you're looking for people. I was just editor-in-chief at Chart Attack. I'm familiar with Now. I know how it all operates, but now I have all this experience. Hire me as just an editor, a jack of all trades kind of guy. And she was interested. She heard my proposal. Now is a union shop, so I don't think the union loved the idea of just creating a new position. Usually that has to be negotiated. It has to be advertised. And so the solution was, we need a copy editor right now. Come into the door, be a copy editor. We'll top that up with a lot of freelance. And while you're just here in the doors, we'll create a position for you. And do it through the regular channels, do it legit. But during that time, while that was happening, Carla announced she was leaving as music editor, and pulled me aside and said, hey, you should apply for this.
Okay.
And I waffled for a while whether or not I should do that or wait to create a new job. But you know, I think for a long time, especially I was a contributor for a long time there in the music section. Like being the Now music editor was kind of a dream job.
Sure.
For a lot of people, I think that, you know, if you were a music writer, being the music editor at the Alt Weekly, and by that point, you know, the Grid and I had both folded. Being that guy was kind of a dream job. It might have been a dream job from an earlier version of myself, but I felt like I had to go for it.
No, I can totally see that. Like when you're designing your career path and you're thinking that's the definitive Alt Weekly, and that's where I would like to write music and become the music editor. Like, yeah, sure, that'd be amazing. And you made it happen. Yeah,
so I applied. I still had to go through the whole thing. I did multiple interviews. I might have even done an editing test, even though I was already in the door as an editor.
Right.
And I got the job. So.
And that's 2016.
Probably 2016.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned, you know, having coffee with Alice Klein and to feel things out or whatever. Because again, the last episode of Reshmi, she was talking about how she kept taking Mike Ben Dixon out for coffee, and Ben Dixon was the program director at 1010 because Reshmi wanted to get on the air at 1010. And I was like, if you were like in a hiring position for some media company in Canada, you would never have to buy a coffee in your life. Like everybody just wants to buy you coffees.
It's true. I mean, I'm an editor too. I've had people ask me for coffee. Nowadays, it's a lot of Zoom. You want to get on a Zoom.
Well, that's bullshit. How do you get a coffee that way?
Exactly.
They have to email you like a Starbucks gift card or something and say, get your own coffee and then meet me on the Zoom.
Yeah. I was in the door there, and it was kind of a similar deal to Chart Attack, actually, where, you know, this was a brand that had a long history. People knew it. People loved it. And it was kind of at an impasse, right? Things were changing quite quickly in the media landscape. And it was sort of like, how do we evolve this thing? How do we, you know, change with the times? It was probably happening a little too late, but that was one of the things that I tried to do. So by that point, you know, I talked about how we were doing a lot of those, you know, every week you'd open the paper and it would be the same. The music section would be essentially the same. You'd open it up to a page of live reviews, whatever the concerts were that day, one giant photo at the top, a live photo,
right? Bunch
of live reviews. Then, you know, maybe 3 or 4 of those profiles of whoever's playing that week. Here's the band. Here's why you should check them out. And then a page of album reviews. And it was like that every single week for probably, you know, decades.
Right.
You know, part of the thing was that the section was then smaller. The paper in general was smaller. There were fewer ads, so there were fewer pages to fill. The staff was smaller. You know, so that in some ways it's circumstance. It's like now we don't have room to do that exact template that I just laid out there. What can we do? What can we do creatively to make this work? And instead of just doing a smaller version of the same thing, it's sort of like, let's use this as an opportunity to really do some interesting stuff. And so, you know, it was a lot less, when we were thinking about profiles, it was a lot less tied to just, you know, here's a preview of a band that's playing. You know, it'd be maybe more issue-based. If we were doing a live review, we'd treat it as a feature and give it a lot of space and sort of use it as context to explain whatever the cultural moment is. You know, I think if you're reading Now Magazine to read your review of OVO Fest or whatever, you probably want more than 150 words about Drake. You probably want to know exactly who was there, what it meant, what it means to, you know,
right,
the hip-hop scene at the time or the pop scene or Toronto. So it was sort of thinking, I guess, bigger picture a lot of the time.
Okay, so much ground to cover here. I do want to, before it gets away from me, my question for you is, do you enjoy Italian food?
I do enjoy Italian food.
Did you anticipate this question? No, okay.
Well, my mom was on, so I know
so you have
coming.
a heads up.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I do have a frozen lasagna for you in my freezer, and that's courtesy of Palma Pasta. Delicious, authentic Italian food. They're in Mississauga and Oakville. Go to palmapasta.com. Much love to those good people.
Nice.
So that's for you, buddy. And before I forget, Reshmi had a good time with this. Measuring tape, because you never know, my friend, when you got to measure something. And that is courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of this community since 1921. And I urge everyone listening to check out Brad Jones's podcast. He's the funeral director at Ridley Funeral Home. His podcast is called Life's Undertaking. He records a new episode every couple of weeks. Always thought-provoking and interesting, and I love producing that show, and I urge you to check it out. So, Richard, that's your job, buddy. You're going to check out Brad Jones's Life's Undertaking.
Will do. Thanks for all the prizes.
All the prizes and 15% off. How's that for a gift for everybody listening? I'm a big fan of Doer, D-U-E-R, the world's most comfortable pants and shorts. And I'm throwing in shirts too because those shirts feel like no other t-shirts in my collection. They feel amazing. This is rugged. This is great looking. It's comfortable as heck. And you can save 15% at doer.ca, D-U-E-R.ca. or go to the new retail store in Toronto on Queen Street West. Shout out and much love to Doer. All right, Richard. So, first, a couple of nice notes before we get into the nitty-gritty here, which warts and all. Okay, Sean William Clark, who is a FOTM himself. He's a great musician. He wrote me a tweet and said, Richard wrote the first serious review I ever got in paper. Seeing my album positively reviewed in Now was so special. So Sean will never forget you, buddy.
Oh, that's nice. I've met him a few times. Super nice guy. Super nice guy.
He's got a jam called, I think it's called Autumn in New Brunswick, that I kicked out during Autumn Jams on a Pandemic Friday because I legit love this beautiful song. It's so lush and gorgeous.
Yeah.
Good job, Sean. And I think I met Sean somehow through The Lowest of the Low. Somehow there was a connection. I think a Wolf Island connection, I believe. But okay. Brother Bill, he says, presuming Now still had them. So you'll tell me when these disappeared. But did Richard ever call one of those numbers in the back pages? This is what people remember about Now magazine in the the 90s and such. Mm-hmm. When did these, what do we call these? What are these called?
The adult pages.
The adult
ads.
pages, yes.
Yeah, adult classifieds.
The escort ads,
right.
etc. When did they disappear from Now?
Were
they there when you got there?
They were, yes. They disappeared and they came back. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, they came back.
I don't know if they're still running. I think they are. I think that was so, there was a long time that they ran them. Michael Hollett went to jail for it, I think.
Right.
And they justified having these ads for a really long time. They fought for their right to do it, and then I think that it was when they eventually made the decision to get rid of them. I think it was a business decision, right? There were certain advertisers who they felt were not going to advertise in Now to be in the same paper as those pages of adult classifieds. And so they got rid of them for that reason. I don't know if the gambit really worked out or not, but I think looking back at it, it probably was also part of the effort to find a buyer to sell the magazine.
Right.
Which they did eventually do. But then they brought them back at some point. I think they were a big moneymaker, honestly.
I would imagine so. I would imagine they were a big moneymaker. So when and to whom does Alice Klein sell Now magazine?
What year was it? I feel like it was 2019, maybe.
Okay.
The end of 2018.
I know the pandemic has messed up our sense of timing. I think, like we know it's pre-pandemic.
I keep saying things happened 2 years ago, and then I think no, that was the pandemic.
See, my brain goes, was that during the pandemic or before the pandemic? That's the first thing, and then once I determine it's before the pandemic, I'm like, okay, well, the pandemic starts in March 2020, and I work backwards or whatever.
Yeah, well, it was not a super long time before the pandemic started that the sale happened.
So probably 2019.
Probably 2019. Yeah, so they sold to a company called Media Central. Company no longer exists, but there is sort of still a lineage there.
Is this the German penny stock company?
They were selling on the Berlin Stock Exchange, I want to say. I think essentially this company formed to buy Now magazine and later the Georgia Straight as well.
Right. Okay. So this was big news. They made ridiculous claims at the time that they were going to save Now magazine. I remember the rhetoric at the time that, they were going to save this all weekly, and you're still there. What was it like inside the office when Media Central took over?
Good question.
Full of good questions, Richard.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting because they, I don't know how to explain it. They were talking about a partnership already at this point. Media Central, their first site that they had before they were Media Central, was a site called Can Central, a cannabis website, CANN.
Right.
And they were running content inside Now Magazine. Like there was the cannabis page would be brought to you by Can Central.
Right.
This was before the sale happened. And, Alice would talk about it. She said, it's a cannabis company that we've, or a cannabis publication, I think, that we've partnered with. And then there was talk that they were going to move into our office and we were going to share the office with them.
Is this the Church Street office? Which office is this?
This was on Spadina.
Spadina.
Yeah,
okay.
Right across the street from the Dark Horse there. It's the CSI building, the Center for Social Innovation.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had a floor in that building.
Okay.
Which I think was like an old, fashion district, like a schmutta factory, we'd say. But,
Say that word again.
Schmutta. That means like a garment.
And is that Yiddish? What is this?
It is
word?
Yiddish.
Okay. I know a lot of Yiddish because I co-host a show with Mark Hebscher, and he drops lots of Yiddish on me. And I enjoy like learning new Yiddish words. But say that one more time slowly. Schmetta?
Schmutta.
Schmutta.
Yeah.
Okay.
My grandfather owned a factory, a sweater factory, in Montreal. But
so it's like the garment district.
The garment district,
right?
Yeah. That was what Spadina was 100 years ago.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And they had converted that building into what was then the CSI building, the Center for Social Innovation. Okay. And the office was not super nice, I wouldn't say. I was in the church office, and I never actually worked there, but I visited a lot as a freelancer.
Right.
I would open mail and pick up promo CDs because that's the vintage that it was, right? And then, by the time I was working there, it was Spadina. I mean, the nice part was it was a 10-minute walk from my house. But where was I going with this? What were we talking about?
Well, I guess, okay, I'm curious, like when you're working for Now, and I mean, I'm thinking, who have I had from Now? Not that many, actually, but
Norm
Wilner for sure, multiple times. So Norm Wilner, when you guys are there on the inside and, Alice Klein is sold to Media Central, and which, when I call it the German penny stock company, that's because that's the handle that Mark Weisblot gave it. So it's like, okay, the German penny stock company. Okay. So, but what is the chit chat like on the inside when that goes down? Like, are you guys buying into the rhetoric? Like this is a good thing, or is there grave concern? Like, I just want the real talk on this.
Well, honestly, we found out about it at the same time that the internet did. We got there and there was like some commotion in I think we were supposed to have a board meeting that day, or like our ed board meeting, which happened every Thursday morning.
Right.
We came in and it wasn't happening, and there were other people meeting in the boardroom, and I think Michael Hollett was there, even though he was no longer involved, or he was at some point. And we're sort of like, okay, something's happening.
Right. With Hollett's here, something's going down.
It might have been a few days before, but we're thinking, oh, something's happening, and then we sort of found out, oh, there's a sale happening. And we all had a big meeting in the back office, the office that was supposed to be for Can Central.
Right.
Where we met the new CEO, and he sort of explained, here's who we are, here's what we want to do. They had a really big grand plan. This was sort of what they were talking about, of buying and consolidating 100 alt weeklies across Canada. And Now was to be the first.
Now, and then Georgia Straight, and then the rest. They ended up buying 2, but the plan was 100. And wow.
Yeah. And they were going to introduce a bunch of new verticals, esports, cannabis, sneakers.
Sure, for the sneakerheads.
They had a diagram that showed how it was all going to work out, and a lot of people were passing around the diagram.
Wow. Did you keep a copy? I want to see it.
It's online somewhere.
So cannabis, I mean, obviously that makes sense considering we know the cannabis and then the esports. By the way, esports, I mean, I've been hearing forever about how esports is going to be the next big, huge fucking thing, and maybe it is. I'm just like not exposed to any of it.
I think esports is really big.
I believe so, but it's like a vertical that's like somehow in my little circle, it's just not touching any of that.
There's a big arena that they're building near on the CNE or something. A company called Overactive Media, which is co-owned by Abel Tesfaye of The Weeknd, aka The Weeknd.
Sure. He's. I heard John Tory. What's the league? John Tory's going to give him the key to the city or something this weekend or something.
I didn't know that, but yeah, the Toronto Overwatch team is going to play there. I think that's going to be their home arena. I
gotta say, man, this might be a generational thing, and that's fine. I'm willing to admit I am Gen X. I want to know, like, I mean, you're not Gen X. I'm guessing you're millennial.
I'm a millennial, and I'm just as perplexed as you are.
Okay. I always have to keep it. I have to remember that some of the stuff we did, those boomers didn't understand it either. So it's like I don't want to become Abe Simpson, like shaking my fist at the cloud. We'll see what happens with this wonderful world of esports. I do remember this, the announcement about the fundamental change that they were going to merge the editorial department with the marketing and the sales department. So sales, marketing, and editorial were like merged. So what is the rhetoric? What's the thought like on the inside with that?
Well, that was at least a year later. That was when we were all working from home. Pandemic.
So that's
era.
A pandemic announcement.
And that was a similar thing. We found out about that at the same time as everyone else.
And at this point, when the pandemic starts, I'm going to ask some personal questions about your pay from Now Magazine. Okay. It's all normal, right? Like they're making payroll and they're paying you 100% of your promised compensation at this time.
Technically, yes.
Okay. Why do you say it like that?
Well, and this actually dates back to before the sale. Okay. We were being paid 15% less than our salaries. And this is something we agreed to because, we're a union shop, as I mentioned. Unifor was our union, and every few years you renegotiate your collective agreement.
Okay.
And it was time to do that. We had a few union meetings where it was sort of like, okay, what do we want to ask for in the negotiations this time around for our contract? Because it's coming up, it's going to be 2019, and they get into negotiations. It's with Alice Klein. Media Central wasn't in the picture yet. And then we had another union meeting where they said, okay, we're going to discuss how the negotiations went. And we came in and they said, so things are really bad. We weren't able to come to an agreement. The company is struggling. Basically, do you want to accept a 15% pay cut and hour reduction? They called it an emergency wage reduction, something like that.
So this is in lieu of like a body count, like in lieu of layoffs, or is it to save the paper?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
So it was not only are we not coming to an agreement on the contract, it's do you want to accept a pay cut? And if not, I don't know if they said this outright, but there's a chance that the paper will just fold. And none of us wanted that to happen.
Right, of course.
So we voted for it and we agreed to it. And the idea was we would work for 15% less and we'd reduce our hours by 15%. By this point, none of us were really working 40 hours a week. We were working 60 hours a week.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of the time.
So, but now they're basically saying instead of 40, they're saying, and I can't do the math, but 30 something.
Yeah, something like that.
Give me that calculator.
Okay. Yeah, I need it. Whatever it was, but
15% less than the 40 that you were supposed to be working, even though it sounds like you're working 60 because there's less bodies.
60 might be an exaggeration, but it was a lot. Yeah, there was less bodies, and even before that, like especially being music editor was always a job that colored outside the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Like, if somebody wrote a live review, the concert's happening probably on Friday. That means I'm at my computer on Saturday editing it and posting it. And it was sort of like, oh, it'll all come out in the wash, right? But then now we're being paid 15% less. So we started keeping timesheets as if we were hourly employees.
Right.
And, calculating it and asking for lieu days if we went over, which all of us did. Right. And, so, and then after we had already...
And at this point, though, as you talk about it, do you still love your job at this point? Because you're still the music editor at Now, but is it like one of those things where it's like, oh, this looked better from the outside than it is on the inside? Like, are you still digging your job, Richard?
I am.
Okay, good.
I am, and I think everyone was. Like, okay. I think that's why we agreed to this, honestly. We could have said, no, we don't accept this and have to continue to negotiate. And who knows what would have happened? It's possible that would have been the end of Now Magazine. I think that, even beyond our own livelihoods, whatever, you're working at an alt weekly. You're probably not necessarily in it for the money.
No, that's a good point. Like, because I have, friends who are like working for nonprofits and different things, and they're like, yeah, we don't do this for the money. Like, you can sell out and, I don't know, get some investment banking job, or I don't know. There's a lot of jobs out there that'll pay you good money, but you're in it for love of the game. You're in it so you could write about, art.
Yeah, and we had all grown up, reading Now. I in high school, I would pick up a copy of Now every week. I'd open to the music section. I'd see even basically was an ad. And I didn't even know it was an ad at the time. The full page Collective Concerts ad every week that just showed who was playing at the Horseshoe and Lee's Palace that week.
Right. Because you only had the two. I mean, I used to once a week, because I was going to school at Etobicoke, but I was once a week I'd go downtown, and I couldn't leave downtown without my copies of Now and iWeekly. Like, I had to have that was the must-have on your journey to downtown Toronto.
And so I think that we all kind of felt a bit of a responsibility for it, right? To the magazine and to the community that we were covering, the music scene, the theater scene, art, movies, what have you. And
okay, so we've got you. I think we're in like 2020 or something now. But do you want to? How many of the people that were writing for Now at that time can you name check?
Who was writing there?
We talked about Norm Wilner, who's covering film.
Norm was a longtime guy. I don't know what year he started, whether it was the 90s or the early 2000s, but close to 2 decades, I feel like he was there for
sure.
Kevin Ritchie was still there at the time. He became the editor after the sale to Media Central, the editor-in-chief, essentially. Carla was still there, Carla Gillis. Enzo Di Matteo was the news editor. And he was a longtime guy, too. I think he was there since the early 90s, something like that.
Right.
As sort of like a political columnist most of the time. Who else was there? Glenn Sumi, did I mention him already?
No, that's a good one, too.
Okay. He was the theater editor. He's still there. He's one of the basically there's 2 editors who are still there.
So who was there with Glenn?
Radhan Simapalai. Rad Simon Pillai. We call him Rad, right?
Right, Rad. Well, I know I even know about Rad later because I guess I don't know if you know this, but every time there's a new issue of Now, Mark Weisblood doesn't believe they're printing it. Okay, right?
I've seen a lot of this on the 1236 Twitter and on.
So Rad swears they're printing it, but there's very little like evidence of this, like other than some that are kind of like. Do you know, are they actually still printing now, or is it just like a nominal number to say it's still in print and not just a digital property?
I think they're still printing. The word is that they're printing and then they just immediately are all taken by the end of the day. I can't say whether that's happening or not, but I do think that, we go through a lot of effort we would go through a lot of effort laying it out and, placing ads and all this kind of thing. I don't think that they would be doing it if it wasn't going out.
Okay, because there's a lot of, Now street boxes that seem to be gathering rust. Okay.
The entire circulation team was laid off at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah. No, this is just all like interesting fodder for the conversation on what happened in Now and where it's at now, but we're kind of out of our chronological order here. Okay, so you're still there. You're making 15% less than you agreed to at the beginning because you all voted as a union shop, and you agreed to that to keep the paper alive.
For the emergency cost-saving measure.
Right, yes, I love it. And then Media Central, of course, is the new owner, and we talked about how they were merging the editorial with the marketing and sales and marketing department.
Well, so there was a Toronto Star story. I'm sure you probably read it, right, about everything that's happened at Now in the last little while.
Yes, but you're now here to tell us more detail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk out of turn, I guess you would say. I don't want you or me to get sued by anybody.
Well, just tell the truth then. This is my lawyer has advised me that as long as you tell the truth, you can't really get yourself in trouble.
Right. Well, yeah, I'll tell the truth. And I'm not, again, same thing. Like we all, this whole time, even now, I feel very positive about Now and the work that we were doing. And, anytime somebody asked me about what's going on at Media Central, what does this mean for you? My answer would sort of be like, I can control what I can control. My job never really changed, although it did later, but my job never fully changed. And it was, the good part about writing for Now always and working for Now was it was a lot of really smart, passionate, dedicated people
Right.
in a room together.
Oh, without a doubt. Like, I think you people who are, writing and putting this paper together, your heart's in the game, best of intentions, and you're all very talented people.
Yeah, and being able to just go to our ed board meeting and talk through ideas, and
Right.
we're all on that page. Like, we're excited about whatever band is playing at Leeds Palace that week, and what it means for the state of the city, and
Right.
what our angle is going to be on Caravana this year, or what about street food? Can we do a big street food issue? And those were the times where the job was really rewarding, I think. And so that was sort of what I was focused on. But then in the background, there is all this stuff happening with the company changing hands, and we're working for 15% less. I think after the sale happened to Media Central, my immediate thought was, okay, we're going to get our salaries restored. We're going back up to our regular salaries.
Right.
And that never happened to this day, right? We stuck out at 15%, but our hours did go back up to 40 a week. And so, but we were still doing the work. Negotiations were ongoing. That never really mounted at that point. Like I said, negotiations broke down. We agreed to that 15% number, and then the company was sold. And so to get back to the negotiation table, and I wasn't in those rooms, but they were then negotiating with Media Central and not with Alice Klein, right? And they were never really able to come to an agreement. And so we had a union meeting, and again, I'm only saying facts here.
Yeah, honestly, Richard, if you tell the facts, you can't get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, we had a union meeting where we voted for whether or not we were going to get a strike mandate. Basically, whether we were going to empower the union to strike if our demands were not met. And negotiations were breaking down. It seemed like they weren't, not only on the pay issue, but I think on just about every clause that they were trying to fight for, they weren't making any headway. And so it's sort of like, we can either agree to a contract that none of us are really in favor for, or we can vote for a strike mandate, and those are our two options. And so we voted for a strike mandate. And what that does, that means that the union, basically, it doesn't mean we're going on strike. It just means that we're giving the union the power to play that card in negotiations.
Gotcha.
To say, okay, if we're not coming at anything, then our workers have voted, and we can go on strike. And at this point, we didn't have a contract. It goes on for a while. At that point, like after a certain point with the strike mandate, essentially what it means is, and it's not like a work stoppage is on the table from both sides. So either they can lock us out and say, it's the opposite of a strike, I guess. It means we're stopping work. You're not working here for the time being.
So lockout.
Yeah, a lockout. And then
as a sports fan, we know these.
Yeah, that's how I learned about it. Or there'll be a strike. And we were prepared for that to happen. It's funny. It was, I feel like, March 2020. Something like that leading up to it. I took all my stuff home from the office thinking, hey, we might be going on strike here. And we had planned to. We were going to go on strike. I took all my stuff home, and I was thinking, well, I guess this is going to be an indefinite period. I guess this is going to be an indefinite period of time at home, not in the office where, we don't know how long it's going to last and what's going to happen.
Right.
And then that is what happened, but not in the way that we thought.
Okay, so now in great detail, I'm fascinated with this detail. Give it to me there. So now now the pandemic strikes. Okay, that was the last day of school. This is the Friday the 13th. It was March 13, 2020. That's when I picked up my kids at school, and March break was the next week. But we didn't know if they'd be coming back. And spoiler alert, that was it for the rest of the school year. Okay.
I remember I was halfway out the door. I had like a foot out the door. I was going to go to the reopening of the Wheat Sheaf Tavern on King Street. The oldest bar in Toronto.
Absolutely.
They were relaunching it as sort of a music venue, and they were going to throw a big party.
Right.
March 13th, I think.
Right.
And I had one foot out the door, and I had basketball on in the background, and
Right.
that was the
Rudy Gobert.
That was the Rudy Gobert game where they canceled the game. And I'm watching and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? I had been here, obviously the pandemic was in the air at that point.
Right.
And then the news came out that Tom Hanks had COVID.
Right.
And then I was thinking, maybe I'm going to stay home. I'm not going to go to this thing. And then,
And the rest is history.
The rest
No,
is history.
I mean, my youngest had a birthday party scheduled for March 14 at like a children's playground thing for all her friends. And because on the 13th, they had all been together in class, right? There were no masks back then. They were all just doing normal. So we actually did it. And I remember March 14, and it felt like, I remember thinking like, oh, this feels dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
This is very dangerous what
Right.
we're doing right now. But we're in
A
some
kid's
kind of
birthday party.
a kid's birthday party on March 14, 2020. And that was it. On the next, then I remember telling Peter Gross, because he would visit me every Monday to do his podcast down the stretch. And I remember saying, Peter, I don't think you can visit anymore. Like, I don't think I can have visitors anymore. And it was like, what's going on here? So that's
now here we are.
Okay, so now what happens next in terms of you and now and
Well, yeah. So then we all, we had a big meeting where it said, this is what's, as I'm sure every company did, this is how it's going to work. You're all working from home.
right.
We're going to figure out how to, and it was hard because it's sort of like, we're so used to putting together a paper every week. There's a whole like page checking process that involves printing the page, handing it to the editor,
Right.
signing off on every page,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. Like, how are we going to pivot that online and through Slack or whatever?
Sure.
And the like archaic Adobe software that we're using to, for all our workflow, all our print workflow. How are we going to do that from home?
Right.
And those were the immediate discussions. We had this ongoing labor dispute that was unsolved, but it was sort of like, our plans were going to be, our strategy was go and pick it at the Now office, tell the story through the media, capture people's attention. But of course, that's not going to happen. COVID is happening. That's on every page of the news.
Right.
We're not going to go pick at a office that nobody is in.
Right.
So, and honestly, we were all just pretty happy to be working at all. We'd look around and we saw our friends getting laid off. We were working from home. We were happy to be able to do that. And so it was sort of like, let's hold off on this for a while. We don't know what a strike would look like. Let's just play this out and see what happens. And so, and again, it's sort of like we all came together as a group to figure out what Now Magazine was going to be through the pandemic. And, I'm pretty proud of what we did, especially for that beginning there. We made some really interesting pandemic issues of Now that, of course, they laid off the circulation staff, so they didn't end up in the boxes.
Right.
But they were in the subway.
But people would have been afraid to touch them anyways.
Exactly. It's funny. It's kind of ironic, I guess. The big issue that we made that week that was hitting the stands that week of the pandemic was about the TTC, because we had just gotten back into they had just renewed their partnership with Gateway, which they didn't have for a while.
Right.
So they were back in the TTC. So we made a TTC themed issue, and
nobody was on the.
Yeah, nobody wanted to touch it. Right, literally, nobody wanted to touch it.
What a time, man! This is what a time. This is an aside, and then we're gonna get back to Now Magazine. But part of me wonders, like, can we do that again? Because we shut everything down. Like, think about it. Everything got shut down. Think of what that did to mental health, to the economy, and everything. But we did. We shuttered everything for a long period of time, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like for and again, I'll be careful when I say this, but for a pandemic that had its kill rate wasn't particularly high. Like, people did die, and that's tragic, and I'm not trying to make light of that. But what if the next pandemic comes and it's got 10% of people who get this die? Like, what if it's got one of those, you can see in the movies, one of those real killer. And 10, what if it's 20 or 30%? Like how do you shut it down again? Now there's some mentality, not myself necessarily, but there are people out there who are like, basically like rage against the machine, like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Like there's this whole like defiance, like, I'm not shutting down, I'm not doing that again. So now that we've fired that shot, which we might have only had that one bullet when I look back at how mankind behaves. You shot the bullet on COVID-19 because we didn't know, and it was I'm not even saying we shouldn't have shot the bullet, but I'm not sure we have another one.
You know what? I was so naive when it happened, and like I said, we all came together despite whatever labor dispute we had in the world. I felt like that's what's happening. Like, we're all just going to come together. Who cares what your politics are? Right. There's a public health crisis. We're all just going to do what's necessary. Of course, like, what the fuck was I thinking, right? That lasted like 2 weeks, and then there were anti-maskers out protesting.
Anti-maskers, and then eventually when science delivers this vaccination, like, oh my goodness, here's my arm. Where's my fourth jab, though? You and I, under 60 years of age, where's our fourth jab?
Good question. I've got the
I
three.
bet your mom's got a fourth jab.
She does.
Mine does too.
My parents both got it quite a while ago, actually.
Right. I know, but I produce a show for Humble and Fred, okay? Humble and Fred have had a fourth shot in their arm for months now. Let's get this in our arms before the September spike we're anticipating.
I kind of wonder if the fourth shot is available, what the rate will be like of people who get it. I feel like people just kind of want to forget.
Well, you and I are going to get it. That's what matters here. I'm going to get it. My brothers will get it. My wife will get it. Anyway, back to Now Magazine. So, walk me through it. When do things change for the negative in terms of this working arrangement with Media Central?
Change for the negative.
Like okay, because at some point I've been reading reports. Like at some point, for example, you're not getting paid that 15% less. You're getting paid like 100% less. Am I right?
Yeah, that mostly started happening just this year, at the beginning of this year.
So like January 2022.
January 2022.
But are you given a heads up? Like, okay, we can't pay you anymore. Like, what happened? Like, how does that conversation go? Because to say will you please agree to 15% less so we can continue the paper is one thing, but to say, hey, we can't make payroll, like tell me.
Well, to get into we were working without a contract. Like I said, there was the negotiations broke down. We were working without a contract for 2 years, I want to say, until early 2022.
Okay.
There was no contract, and so essentially what that meant is we didn't have any power as a union. At least in terms of enforcing the collective agreement, the collective agreement was out of date. And so technically the company could just go and impose their own terms and we wouldn't have had much recourse. Eventually they did get back to the negotiation table, right? Mm-hmm. And this was just at the beginning of this year. And at this point, it was pretty clear what the financial situation of the company was, which, was not great. And so...
like they were basically bleeding money. I can't remember the numbers anymore, but it was worthless because of the debt that had been incurred.
Yeah, it depends how you define worthless, I guess.
Yeah, right.
I never thought of it as worthless, at least now as a magazine. Like, I thought it had I honestly still think it does have a ton of value as a brand, and as a paper, right? And as the people who are working for it.
Right. I shouldn't have said it that way. I meant just on the financial statements were like, okay, we have this debt of millions of dollars, which is what I meant by that.
Right. So, by that point, the union did get back to the table and agreed to continue working for 15% less because, essentially the company said we can't afford to pay you more than that. And there's a clause in there that says if the company has 2 or 3 profitable quarters in a row, then we immediately go back to our regular salary, something like that. And we're not stupid. We could see the reports. Right. We didn't necessarily think that was going to happen, but this was the best we were going to get at that point. And, like I said, there was a lot of goodwill. We want the company to survive. We want this paper to work. And I think that is really hard as, there's a labor movement happening across the world. the Great Resignation, the work movement. You see this everywhere.
Right.
And more specifically, there's also like a unionization drive happening at digital media properties, which hadn't existed before. BuzzFeed unionized, Vice did for a while. These are places that I feel like for a long time, the big newspapers were like, the Toronto Star was unionized and the Globe and Mail. But the newer media publications, the disruptors, it's sort of the tech company model. They're kind of allergic to unions a lot of the time.
Right.
And it started to happen. And I think that media workers were thinking of themselves as workers for the first time in a long time, especially, us young, underpaid millennials and Gen Z. It's sort of like, and journalism itself, especially too, it's sort of like you have the mentality like, we're doing good work. We're working crazy hours. In the past, it was like chain smoking and typewriting and whatever it is now. Right. It's, we weren't thinking of ourselves as like, this is the money that we're going to get. Like I said, none of it, we're working for an alt weekly. None of us were under any illusions that we're getting rich from this.
Right.
But I think throughout the world, it's like, especially during the pandemic, people sort of have been coming to terms with or realizing A, the value of their labor, and B, the importance of life outside of work. There was a really good story, I think, in Chatelaine about, it was called like Losing My Ambition. And it was, a journalist there, I think it was Emile Niazi, wrote a story. And, she was coming from a feminist perspective as a mother as well. But it really resonated with me still about, we have this ambition that the hard work is going to pay off later. And, it's going to be worth it in the end. And, I think a lot of people throughout the pandemic realized, like, maybe it's not.
Right. Great awakening, right.
And in media, especially, like, looking around, you see all your friends getting laid off left and right. At the same time this is happening to us, you look at Vice and you see, like, 100 people who were laid off today. Even the big media, the Star, like, there were a ton of layoffs. And, it makes it really hard to, like I said, again, going back to that 15% thing when we were counting our hours, I feel like we all were sort of like, okay, we got to sort of do a little soft work to rule here. We got to make sure we're not working over these hours and giving away our labor at a time where they're not properly valuing it. And that was really hard for a lot of us, honestly, because we cared.
Right. You gave a shit.
We gave a shit. And in media too, I think that when you're talking about a typical labor dispute, it's sort of like you have the two parties. It's the workers and management. And in our case, there's a third party, which is the readers. And even a fourth party, which is like the music scene, the communities that we were covering, the artists.
Right.
And we felt a responsibility to all of them. Right. And so it's sort of like if you're sacrificing a bit of your own labor rights to meet this goal, you might do it voluntarily, and we did do it voluntarily. And, some of us tried. I feel like there was talk of doing that, of sort of like, we're not going to give them more work than they're paying us for. But I don't think any of us were really able to do it. Like,
Well, that's the problem with giving a shit, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't own it, I give a shit now, but it feels so different when you give a shit for something that you are the sole proprietor of. It's a whole different kettle of fish. But
yeah,
But how does it end for you at now? Like, is it as simple as, oh, you're not paying me anymore, so I can't afford to work for you?
Well, okay, so I guess to continue the chronology, by that point we did have a contract in 2022.
Right, for the 15% less.
Yeah,
right.
And we agreed to that. So we're sort of like, we know that this is our salary. Like,
so you just took your salary and okay, but you were already doing that for a couple of years anyway because you had agreed to do that previously.
I guess so, but I mean so
but the hope was then that it was temporary. Now it's basically like saying like, okay, this is now permanent.
Yeah, unless the company becomes profitable again,
right?
And then we'll get our full salaries again. So yeah, then sometime in 2022, the paychecks started coming late. at first it was by, let's say, a day or two, and we'd ask, we'd have an email chain and say, hey, is our pay coming? And they'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, we're just like moving around a few things. It'll come soon. Like it's been sent to the.
Always scary
accountant.
though. No, I've worked for software companies in my life where it was like there was not easy to necessarily have periods where it wasn't easy to make payroll, and it's nerve wracking when you're expecting that money in your account on a Thursday morning or whatever, and it's not there. It's scary, right? Because you got to pay rent, right?
We got to pay rent. There being people who were there for 20 years, 30 years, with kids, with mortgages.
Yeah.
I think now for a really long time, like in the Michael Holland era, he had talked about how every time like a now worker would buy a house, they would celebrate. They'd be happy, And now
that's impossible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Now
unless
none of us are buying
unless
a
mom
house.
and dad are putting down the down payment.
Right. Who knows if I'll ever be able to buy a house, but
that's actually another conversation because you mentioned you're millennial, but I got Gen Z kids, and I know you said Gen Z, but I refuse because it's Gen Z. But I don't know.
Do you call them JZ as well?
Yeah, that's different. That's like ZZ Top. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll call it ZZ Top because that's different. But I don't know how my 20-year-old buys property, and I don't even know if my 20-year-old cares. But when I was 20, that was the goal. No joke, and I'm older than you. Okay, I'm Gen X. But when I was 20, I thought I can own something by the time I'm 30 because I can buy something for $200,000.
Right.
Think about that for a minute. What do you get now for $200,000? You don't even get a parking spot for $200,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not much of that. But yeah, so the paycheck started coming late, and then it started coming later and later. And we had these big town hall meetings to say, hey, what's happening?
Right.
And
it's still Media Central? Is it still Media Central that's supposed to be paying you?
At first, yes.
Okay.
And then again, I'm finding this out like reading it elsewhere a lot of the time.
But you're reading it in reputable sources, right? Like the Toronto Star.
Well, that was later, but there was no. But sometimes it was press releases being issued by Media Central.
Gotcha.
Because they have to. They're a publicly traded company,
right?
And so they have to be
transparent
to especially
they have to
to their
disclose
shareholders.
these things to their shareholders, right?
And they're saying, we've lost however many million in debt. And I don't know exactly how it worked, but there was a guy named Wei Lin who I guess held the debenture. Again, I'm speaking about all this business stuff that I'm
impressed.
I'm fuzzy
your
on
mom
how
can
it
help you
works.
with some of this.
Yeah,
maybe.
my mom probably could. And he, so he basically foreclosed, I don't know what the word is, on that debt.
He called it in?
He called it in.
Yeah, he wanted, I don't know what the term is either, but basically you got to pay up now.
And so somehow what they were able to do is they bankrupted Media Central. Media Central goes bankrupt. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But Now and the Georgia Strait, which they owned, did not go bankrupt. They were separated off from Media Central and basically are now, I think, controlled by this guy, Wei Lin, I think. Don't quote me on any of this.
It's okay. It's funny because we started with you at Chart Attack of Channel Zero, and Mark Hebscher has told the great story of basically, we are bankrupt now. We can't pay you severance, but oh my God, we just started a new company, like a numbered Ontario company that now
I remember that whole thing.
Does the same thing.
I was in the office when all that went down.
So you guys are gone. Peace, no severance. And you guys can have your old jobs back at like a 30% reduction or something.
Well, they were accused of union busting at that point.
It never smelled right to me. So like these
I was never in a
games.
union at Chart Attack. We were sort of a separate thing. But I was there. They had a whole, speaking of town hall meetings, they gathered everybody to say, because there was a day where, everyone was hearing about layoffs. I think they mostly happened in Hamilton.
Well, they had the day in Hamilton where it was like you were going to a certain room because Hebsy went to the wrong room. So he went to the room where you're going to be offered back your own job. Like you can now accept your own job at a reduced rate. But he was supposed to be in the other room, which was basically, you're fired, no severance, peace.
I remember there was a lot of people just being like, whispering like, are we still going to have jobs at the end of this? But I don't think anyone in the Toronto office was laid off. I don't think. But anyway, this is neither here nor there.
Okay, but back to now.
Way
I
back
know.
in time.
It's way back in time. Well, not that far back, but yeah, it's going back.
Yeah. So, our pay was coming later and later. At this point, we couldn't strike because we had our contract, and you can only strike at certain periods. So, if anyone raised it, I think with Unit 4, the answer was, if there's any work stoppage, that's going to be considered a wildcat strike, and that's illegal. So just work the hours and we'll fight for them later.
Wow.
Essentially. And we kept working. And, like I said, we've seen this, labor movement happening in digital media, especially in the States. You see a lot of it. I've seen a lot of like BuzzFeed Media or BuzzFeed Union Twitter account will form, right? And that'll be the mouthpiece of the union.
Right.
We never did that. We kept pretty quiet about the whole thing. And again, part of it was just we wanted to see this thing succeed.
Right.
We didn't want the paper to close. So
because you gave a shit.
Yeah, we gave a shit.
It all comes up. There's your great flaw. You gave a shit.
And it's hard because your identity is tied up in it. And so it's not just that you're not getting the money, which hurts, right? Like financially it hurts. But it's also like you feel like you're, this thing that you're giving such a shit about is also not valuable. And that takes like a hit to your ego, I think, as well. And, I see it for so long. You mentioned Sean earlier.
Right.
I gave him his first review in Now, and he was so happy about it.
Sean William Clark.
The Alt Weekly, actually, the musician Cadence Weapon, the rapper,
sure.
Rolly Pemberton, wrote a book. I blurbed his book, but he wrote a book called Bedroom Rapper.
Yeah.
Really good book. I recommend it to anyone reading. And he had a chapter, so it's like a memoir, but every chapter is kind of a little essay. And he had a chapter about music criticism and music journalism, because for a long time, he wrote reviews for Pitchfork, and he was sort of the hip hop reviewer for Pitchfork.
Right. And
then later he worked in Edmonton for Edmonton, both of Edmonton. They had two competing alt weeklies similar to Toronto called View and See. And he worked for both of them at one time or another. But he wrote about it in that paper about just sort of like, he says he was writing all these things. It was weirdos working at the alt weeklies. He'd come in and it would be sort of this weird ecosystem. He felt like he was part of the ecosystem of the music scene by writing about it, even if no one's reading it necessarily.
Right.
There's all this weird stuff happening at, in rooms for maybe 100 people. And if no one's writing about it, it's not going to be remembered. And so, this is kind of the problem, I think, now with digital media is you're so beholden to the page view. And so, you're looking at a lot of your coverage is going to be dictated by what's going to do traffic numbers.
Well, so you got to keep writing about Drake in the weekend.
You write, yeah, and that's always going to get your numbers. And, to an extent, I don't want to write off writing about Drake in the weekend. First of all, I like both those artists, but
that wasn't meant to slant them, but basically they get the clicks. So you're not going to discover the up and coming or the interesting artist who's not, the weekend.
You got to have both. You got to have both. But it's sort of like if you're covering, we're talking about this thing that's happening in whatever, the Silver Dollar Room, and 100 people are there.
Right.
That means 100 people are going to read the story. And you're going to look at that, that page view number and say, oh, it's not worth covering a show at the Silver Dollar.
Right.
I think that's what's happened at a lot of music publications.
It's sports too. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And so, that was sort of part of the challenge, I think, with me as music editor is we didn't want to abandon that. We still want to be the people covering those up and coming artists before they're Drake.
Someone's got to cover that Police show at the Horseshoe, and there were 9 people there that the Garys put on.
There you go. Gary Top used to call me at my desk and talk for a really long time.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, both Garys are amazing, but Gary Top, I get notes from him too. Even today, he's quite the specimen. Good man. Okay.
Yeah.
So how does it end for Richard Trapunski at Now Magazine?
I stuck it out for quite a while. Longer than some other people, but essentially, they weren't paying us on time, and it was a question of what do we do? Do we want to keep working? Some people said it'll be better to just be able to collect EI, and then at least there's some money coming in. And so the company, to their credit, did allow anyone who wanted to ask for a layoff and then be able to go on EI and be laid off for lack of work, right? And that's what I eventually did. But
And we're only going back like a few months now, right? Like when are we talking here? Like March 2022? When are we talking?
yeah, my last day was the very end of April.
End of April. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, May, June, July. Okay, you're only you're not even 3 months
Yeah.
post.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
but I still haven't got any EI yet. But that's not about.
that's another problem.
yeah.
We can discuss another episode. Okay. So firstly, I want to just make sure you know, Richard, that I'm sorry this happened to you because you're a passionate guy who's good at his job and you gave a shit, which, by the way, I realize as I get older that I'm just desperately seeking for people to have passion for something. Like, it's passion is what I'm looking for. I love that you have passion for what you do and you were going to do it for 15% less and you were going to work your 50, 60 hours for that smaller payroll. And then even, you stuck it out as long as you could until eventually you needed to get paid to work because you're not, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not independently wealthy.
Right.
You're not sitting on some huge trust fund that might make it so you can goof around without having to get properly compensated.
Yeah, I mean, I stuck it out for as long as I felt like I could. And it was sort of like...
But did you go to your mom for advice? Now, I'm not trying to bring the great Ellen Roseman into this, but she's a savvy person when it comes to consumer affairs and business like this. Would you go to her and, ask for advice? What do I do? They're late on the payroll. We're doing it for 15% less. Would you?
I kept my parents abreast of
in
what
the
was
loop.
happening, right?
Okay. And you
know,
don't
it's
have
sorta
to.
hard.
This could be a private. You don't have to answer. But I'm wondering, was your mom like saying, Richard, you've got to move on and do something else. It's over at now.
I don't know if she ever said that necessarily, but that was the decision that I came to.
Right.
And they approved of that decision, I think, or
They blessed that thought.
It was, it was for a very long time. I was waiting to find out if it seemed like we were gonna this situation was gonna be solved, and I wanted to wait to see
Right.
if we would be able to, if things would
Right the ship.
right themselves. And I think that
The pandemic was a huge curveball clusterfuck the timing couldn't have been worse for everything that we're describing. Because then right there, a lot, the live venue shut down. There's
yeah, exactly.
Like you need ads to support the content. And of course, I'm guessing the ads took a massive hit due to the pandemic.
Absolutely. And there was only one salesperson there selling. And that was the only revenue that was coming in.
And it was the only client was probably the government telling people how they can get CERB.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this time where we were,
or get your vax.
where the paycheck is coming late, it was sort of like, we're going to pay you when we have the money in our account to pay you. And the money that's coming in is coming from ad sales. And, I think the big swing is that they're trying to sell.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, like, we could find out tomorrow that now has changed hands again, right? Like, this is the rumor out there.
It's possible it could happen, and
It could happen right now.
Technically,
check your Twitter feed.
Technically, I think I'm on temporary layoff. So if
Oh.
everything came back tomorrow, they could call me back and say, "Do you want to come back to work?"
Okay. So it's not a clean cut here. Okay, gotcha. So but in the meantime, you still need to pay your rent and you probably need to eat. I can give you this lasagna, but it's it's gonna be good for a few meals at
That'll
least.
be nice.
But
I'm working on a project right now, a freelance thing for Fodor's guidebook. The travel guide.
yes.
Basically, like, I'm editing a couple of chapters and updating them because they put out a new edition every few years, and the last one was before the pandemic. And so a lot of it is just like seeing what's closed and what hasn't, and then
Sure, but you'd be good at this.
And it's been fun. It's been kind of been like being able to be a tourist in
And
Toronto.
they pay more than $100.
Yes, they do,
I
but
do-
it's a freelance thing. As
Sure,
well.
it's freelance. I mean,
Yeah.
right. Which will suck, I suppose, when you need dental work or something. Like, this is where I get. Now, I'm married. Okay,
Mhm.
Are you single?
No, I'm engaged.
Okay. Is it to a man, woman?
My partner Marie, she
Okay.
Well, the
So
thing is
does Marie have health care?
Well, what's funny, she
Or,
actually
benefits. I mean,
she was working for Bell Media for a long time, and I was actually on her benefit plan because it was
Right.
better than ours.
this is the move, right?
And not long before all this went down, she changed jobs, and she's now working for an American company, fully remote. And she doesn't currently have benefits, so she got on my benefit package.
Oh no! But you're okay. So, but bottom line is, as a freelancer, this is the tough part because I don't have benefits with my job because it's a sole proprietorship. I own TMDS, but my wife has benefits, and I jump on hers.
Right.
So if I go get I get my teeth cleaned, I only have to pay 20%.
Sure, and your kids too. It's
yeah.
important.
Well, that's the thing. The 2 kids I have with her are fine, and then the 2 kids I have with my first wife have to go on her plan. But anyway, this is all in the nitty gritty here. But bottom line is, you were like in the Toronto Star like super recently. Like we should shout out that you wrote about Toronto's goth scene, the Borderline Plus.
Yeah, that was a fun story. I'd say I was a little bit worried. I held off for so long staying at Now, sort of like what's going to come next because. You know, it's hard to leave a job. You always hear you don't want to leave a job until you have another job.
Well, that's ideal, but not always practical.
Yeah. I didn't have another job lined up, but I did. After I left, I had a lot of people reach out to me, which was nice. You know, some with potential opportunities, some with freelance things. That's how I got this photos thing. It was actually one of my old coworkers.
Oh, good.
And yeah, so the Star, the editor of the Together section, I see you were in the Together section. You have it framed right here.
That's right.
Reached out and said, hey, we're looking for writers. Your name came up. Are you interested in writing?
So it's essentially like, 'cause there's a lot of photos with that, right? Like I had 4 color photos in that like 2-page spread that was in the Together section. And the great Gilles LeBlanc wrote that article. So you wrote an article on... I want to get the name of the store right because I'm not as familiar
Borderline
with
Plus.
Borderline Plus, which is like, I guess the goth stores on Queen West have disappeared, but Borderline Plus remains.
Yeah, So in the 80s and 90s, Queen West was like goth central, and there were a ton of goth stores.
Right.
When I was in high school, that was the early 2000s. But I had a goth friend who would always want to go down to Queen, right, and go to all the goth stores, and I would tag along. And you know, I live in that area now. And I see it. The Queen is obviously totally different.
Right.
But, you know, walking by Borderline, I'm like, oh, it's still there. And I walked in and I kind of talked to them a little bit. And I was like, you know what, I think there's a story here. So I pitched it.
So you just pitch it to the Star and then they buy it as a freelance and they hopefully pay more than $100. So
they pay more than $100, yeah. But you know what, as a freelancer, I mean, that's the next frontier.
Right.
We're talking about labor stuff, is freelance and contract workers and gig workers. You know, not just me, but like the Uber Eats driver or whatever else is, you know, those are the people with the least labor protections.
But there's no sick. I always think of my business like I have I don't even believe in knocking on wood, so it doesn't matter. But COVID, okay, like if I get knocked down with COVID, like I won't make money for like I need to like I don't have sick days. This and you know, and we talked about. I'm lucky that I'm married to somebody with some benefits, so I don't have to pay 100% for like a teeth cleaning or if I get sick for antibiotics or if my eyes go to shit because they're getting worse every year. Richard, I'm an old man, but then I don't have to pay like through the nose for optical stuff.
There are probably some packages you can buy into. I think that some freelance writers have group packages that they've just like. They buy that's
okay because I got my wife's plan, so that's okay. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Very fragile part, and more and more people doing the gig economy here and piecing it all together.
With freelance writing, it tends to be, you know, whatever amount you've negotiated for, it comes usually 30 days after publication. So, you know, if you write a story and it involves a whole lot of editing, you know, and it drags on for months and months and months, you're not getting paid during that whole time.
Right.
So I think it has a lot of benefits too. Like there's so much freedom and, you know.
Well, you set your own hours.
You set your own hours. You can write about what you want and where you want as long as an editor will take it. We'll buy it.
And if you have multiple like channels and outlets and bosses, you don't give all the power to one to like just dislike you and fire your ass. You know
I mean, technically you're your own boss. You're the owner of a small business, a freelancing company.
Right. Now, Richard, before we say goodbye, you probably hear voices in the background. You're like, what the hell is Mike doing here? So let me bring this up while I talk about it.
And I owe just as much rent up here as he did.
Do you know what this is? Maybe we should give it a moment. Do you know the song Open the Door, Richard?
I think I've heard it before.
Okay. This is like an old standard. Like we're going way back of this jam, but this is your song, buddy. Open the Door, Richard.
Who's this version by?
Great question. This version is by Dusty Fletcher. Open the Door, Richard. So Dusty Fletcher. I actually wanted to see what was the most popular version on YouTube, and it was Dusty Fletcher. So I said, I'm going with good old Dusty. You can't go wrong. But Richard, before we say goodbye, because you took a long bus ride to get here, is there anything you haven't shared with us that you were like thinking on the bus? So I got to make sure I say this.
I think not really. I didn't come with any agenda or anything.
So to put the bow on this, though,
Yeah.
now could be the rumor is now is going to change hands any minute now, and then that will determine your that'll bring you the closure, right? Because you're kind of in a weird spot where you're laid off. Is that the term? You're
Yeah.
laid off, and you're freelancing, and you're the EI. You have to figure that out. Who
Right.
knows what's going on there? But you got to figure that out.
The freelancing is what held up the EI. But anyway.
Okay, so yeah, you made money. That's a big mistake. We don't incent that. Don't make money. Come on, Richard. But okay, so we're gonna find out what happens. But needless to say, now is a shadow of its former self. Can I say that? I know you'll be hesitant to say that, but it's you're gone. Norm Wilner's gone. Most of these great writers at now are gone, right?
And Glenn and Rad are still there, and they're doing good work. They're good editors, but they're pretty much, and there's a handful of other people who are also working there, but that handful of like 5 or so people are the people keeping it afloat.
And Weisblot keeps his eagle eye out for boxes of Printed Now magazine, and he doesn't believe what Rad says when Rad says we're printed.
All that said, I really hope that they can figure this out, and if Now continues on and they find a way out of this, I'll be reading every single week.
I love the passion, Richard. Honestly, I love it. And I wish you nothing but success with the freelance. And then I know freelance is a pain. Somebody should step up and bring you on full time because you're a talented, young, passionate man. And that's what we want in our media.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man. Okay, and share some of this lasagna with your mom. Invite her over and share some of the lasagna with her. Is that cool?
I need it, man. I haven't got this EI.
And I got Great Lakes beer for you, too. And if you ever need to measure something and you got an ashtray, you came to the right place, Richard. Nice to meet you, man. And that was a great convo. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of the details I've been curious about it. Now you've scratched that itch. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
And that brings us to the end of our 1077th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Now, Richard Trapunski is at Trapunski, and it's spelled like you think, but with an I at the end, not a Y. It's Trapunski. You can't even screw that up. Stick an I at the end of that. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Doer are at Doer Performance. Remember, you can save 15% with the promo code Toronto Mike. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana, they're at Canna Cabana _ See you all tomorrow when my guest is the aforementioned Mark Weisblot. See you all then.
You know that's true.